welcome. This is the part 11 of this natural law series, and I've invited back the Eighth Flame crew. So Kylie is with us, and Melanie is with us. Trey, we're thinking about you. You are with us in spirit, so I'm looking forward to sharing this with you when we are complete. But yeah, this is part of a series called the Natural Law and Regenerative Economy series. I'm going to get into a little bit about where we've been over the past few months and where we've been specifically this month. But I just want to remind anybody who is watching this that if you are a member of the Karmic Margin Call Project Time Bank, you can receive credit for watching this episode and for all of the episodes just by going to the Karmic Margin Call Project Time Bank and registering today. Should be about an hour and a half or so. Just put in for an hour and a half credit of a service you are providing from the Karmic Margin Call Project, and you can categorize that under workshops, presentations, and tutorials. So let's just reintroduce everybody. Let's reintroduce Kylie and reintroduce Melanie. I am going to since Melanie is driving, I want you to be focused on your driving, Melanie. So we want to be as safe as possible here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my screen on gallery view so that we can see everybody as we have this conversation. So yeah, before I introduce myself, Kylie, in just a minute or two, would you like to introduce yourself to someone who might be watching this for the first time? What would you like to know about you? What's alive in your world at this moment?
Well, I mean, since it's the first time, I probably should say chirotic flow. I'm all about chirotic flow at the moment. Writing a book. Um, and quick overview, I suppose, of chirotic flow is it's a cycle of the activities that life needs to perform in order to continue, shall we say. It's got 6 archetypes that interact with each other, require particular conditions for those activities. And yeah, it's turned out to be something that's quite big and takes up pretty much everything I am at the moment.
Very good, Kylie. And I'll add on to that as well too. We've been speaking the language of chirotic flow quite a bit over the last couple of months. So as I talk about where I feel like my ministry efforts are going, a lot of it is really about the intersection of universal principles, or what we call natural law, and helping others to speak the language of chirotic flow to yeah, make things easier, to help people talk to each other, to identify how to make collaborative environments out of competitive environments. And I think chirotic flow, just in the year and a half that I've known you, it really made a night and day difference in my life. So we'll get into that a little bit here today. So Melanie, please feel free to introduce yourself. Again, you're driving, but what would you like to tell anybody who might be watching this now? Just what's alive for you in your world, and a little bit about you. Oh, you are on mute. There you go.
I wanted to just come on briefly and say hi and give thanks to you, Michael, for making space for these conversations. They're always so rich. And I'm in the beautiful Oregon countryside on a rare sunny day in December and driving up to Portland. So I'm going to go off camera. But I want to jump actually onto the gratitude wagon around chirotic flow and what Kylie has done so beautifully to bring into the field of conversation for us at the Pivot.Earth, who are designed to be a stewarding organization. Kylie has brought a languaging and a capturing of understanding to what that actually means to move into big ecosystem changes, systemic change that we know we all need, but doing it from a place of understanding how energy and power needs to move within structures. So what's really alive for me right now is the opportunity to be working in the healthcare arena and start to look at paying for what works. And we don't do that in America. Socialized systems, they do tend to do that. We don't. we've been captured by interests that don't make sense. And I'm so delighted to have language to be able to understand the power of being a steward and applying the energies and support for those who are on the ground doing the work, but keep steering towards what they need and what place are they at in their process, and what are the hold-ons within hold-ons that Kylie so beautifully talked about, that we can step into being assistance and support mechanisms for. This is what's largely missing, is that feminine nurturing, or what Kylie talked about on the purple side. And that has got me so excited right now in the work that we're doing. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. So great. I will also piggyback on that, in that today's conversation, which is the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, we're going to be relooking at kairotic flow as kind of the language, to help people understand, or to help the individual understand, where is their focus, and how are we better able to receive information, with the knowledge of how the flow works, what is that relationship between the 6 archetypes. And if you're unfamiliar with the archetypes, please feel free to look at volume 4, which is the law of rhythm, where the 4 of us, Trey was a part of that conversation, where we kind of gave an overview of those archetypes. But my mission at the moment is, I have two focuses, 2 areas of focus. As a ministry candidate, what I'm focused on is establishing a living library to help people talk to each other, to help people become listeners, better listeners, deeper listeners, so that we can make collaborative environments and understand how competitive environments work, why they exist at the moment, and how to create more collaborative ones. So the living library is really about healing communities through the spoken word, but also through the written word as well. So that's we're engaging in some of those Winfinity principles that Trey had introduced me to 3 or 4 years ago, like ongoing inquiry, and being able to release, to relinquish positions and representations in the now, so that we can talk to each other as peer to peer. So that's one of my focus. And my other focus is about introducing natural law or universal principles to help universal basic income become possible. And we were talking about that before the recording came on. So just to give a brief overview about where we've been so far, back in October, when we did the first 4 natural laws, that was just focused on conversation culture, really how to have a living library conversation, how to start to step into some more difficult, uncomfortable conversations around power, and around how to change power structures. During November, we were looking more about the mechanics, about how time banking starts to point towards the direction of universal basic income. So I gave a lot of technical information in those recordings about how to change the relationship between time and money, so that the commons, or those who are participating in a time bank, can start to change the rules a little bit between time and money. And now here in December, we're kind of hitting the ground running, and I'm starting to give specific invitations. We did a lot of appreciation and possibility conversations, and now we're starting to get into invitation a little bit. So so what we're looking at is the first recording that we did here in December was law of magnetism, which we were talking about how, when you're with the right people, or when you're with people that you are in alignment with, you can't really say anything wrong. But when you're with the wrong people, sometimes it feels like you can't say anything right. So we asked the question, well, who is attracted to you? Who is attracted to these, to the work you are doing? Where is there a natural flow, and where is there a relationship where deeper honesty is possible? And that, under law of magnetism, you don't have to push yourself into a world that's not ready for you. You have the deeper conversations with those who are already in your space. Last week, we did the law of compensation, where we talked a little bit more about the specific mechanics and the accounting system, about how time banking can change the value of an hour, change the value of an hour for the commons, and really the practical next steps on how to participate in that kind of accounting system. So we'll talk a little bit today about the chirotic flow archetypes, but there's a lot of regulator activity, I think, in that conversation. So today, I invited Kylie and Melanie back for this conversation because I think a real key piece of information is chirotic flow. I'm starting to think of it as a language, and Kylie is sourcing this information, so she is kind of like the interpreter, I think, of the chirotic flow language. And Melanie, Trey, and I, we have been learning it for the past. For me, it's been about a year and a half now, Kylie. So the way I want to tie this into perpetual transmutation of energy today is this understanding that energy, in its basic form, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It merely changes form. And we had discussed, over the last year or so, how you have compared the archetypal flow there to gas, liquid, and solids. Do you mind my asking, if we open this conversation, how did you discover that, or what's the story behind that kind of comparison that you have found?
So mostly noticing just what happens, like what it looks like, and the properties being somewhat similar. So, up at the top of the flow, Scout and Pioneer, that I call sort of gaseous, I guess, are fast moving, come together, go apart, expand out into whatever space they kind of can. Nothing hangs around for very long. It's a lot more, I suppose, spiritual, mental kind of in that area. Things aren't settled at all. And then going down to the bottom, Steward and Regulator, or I suppose if they were in order, Regulator and Steward, are both quite solid. So by the time you get down to Regulator activities, it's like you're setting a rhythm because you know that something actually works consistently. So think of like, heartbeat, or a structure that we rely on, like our skeleton, for instance, or a circulatory system. And change slows right down at that point. So it's like solid, because solid doesn't mean that it doesn't change at all. It just means that it's moving very, very, very slowly. So the pace slows down, we can rely on it more. And then the other two, Curator and Cultivator, are sort of in between that. They've got like a liquid nature to them. And you notice it with a versatility and filling whatever the container is that they're in. So if you think of how water behaves, like if you pour it on a table, it just kind of it flows off the table and goes absolutely everywhere. So it's just observation that's what happens. But there's something I'd love to add in, if I may. As soon as you said that about the perpetual transmutation of energy, I'm going to bring in the word power, right? So I actually talk about power flowing through the cycle as opposed to energy. And that is because energy comes in so many different forms that if we just try and talk about energy, it ends up getting confusing. Are we talking potential energy or kinetic energy or, heat energy? What sort are we talking? Power in physics terms is essentially the rate at which work is done. And by work, again, using the physics definition, that's actually the rate at which energy is transferred or transformed from one place to another. So power is sort of a very accurate kind of term there. So that perpetual transmutation of energy is kind of like perpetual power.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. What has come up for me, and I'd like to ask both of you, what your thoughts and feelings on this. What comes up for me often, especially playing in the scout in the pioneer space, as opposed to playing, and I use the word playing, very carefully as well too, because it is work. In the regulator and the steward space, I often notice this dichotomy between freedom and structure, where when I'm speaking with other with other scouts and pioneers, there is kind of like that flow, and there's this there's almost like this, oh, okay, we're building ideas, but so still in the air yet, but yet to be grounded. And when I'm in conversation, especially in my in the organizations that I'm working with as well too, when I'm with regulators and stewards, there's this or people who feel comfortable in those areas. There seems to be more of a focus on structure and grounding it. Yeah, I'd like to hear from both of you. Have you? Does that sound accurate? Does that sound resonant? Just knowing where you guys are, in the flow as well too. I'd like to hear both your thoughts on that.
I'd love to jump in on that one.
Mhm.
I'd mentioned that the work that we do in my enterprise is around stewarding, and Kylie helped us bring clarity around that language. And I would also add that there's an indigenous understanding of a non-divided worldview that also has language and understanding around this. But we've lost a lot of that. So kudos to Pyrotic Flow for capturing. So as a steward myself, the dance between structure and moving back into a more fluid phase is really my delight. I'm a very grounded person, very earthy person in many ways, but I'm also particularly curious about what we have perpetuated as structures and regulations and ways of doing business that start to become edifices rather than having any reflection about them, and casting a light on them. Is this working? Is this useful? Is this moving us in the direction we say that we want to head? And do we still want to head in that direction? And those are the questions that are not usually asked. We love to have things feel solid and familiar so we can put to bed that part of our tendency for apprehension and feel, oh, the state will take care of that. My public utility company has that. My insurance, my health insurance has that. But when you really start to look at where we've gone, examining and through the structure,
Melanie, you're breaking up on my end.
I take real delight. Oh, darn it.
That's okay. I really want to get this, but
Yeah,
yes. If you could just repeat that last part again, I would love to receive that.
Yeah, it's just this delight in being able to actually step into the language and the understanding that you have to take all that ossified, solidified stuff and routinely look at it carefully. Is this serving? Is it moving us in the direction we want to be headed? And why are we doing this? What's sacred here? And then handing that off to somebody who's good at curating and capturing feels so important. So the steward role is kind of the great divider, or the Kali. There's a Kali nature, if you're familiar with that god in the Vedic tradition, who is sort of dispassionately dismembers things.
Yeah. Oh, I think we lost you there, Melanie. Oh, okay, you're on mute now. Yeah, Kylie, would you like to reflect on that? And yes, go for it.
Yes, yeah, I was thinking it's lovely. So that the archetypes of regulator and steward, even though they're both sort of got that solid nature, there's more to them. So regulator is, like establishing the structure and the rhythms and so on. But it's still a little bit heady. like in that sense of, that it's been designed, it's got an intention behind it. It's trying to make things clear and constant. And then Steward is maintaining and nurturing and meeting needs and so on. So it's like it's using the structures and applying them like in reality. And of course, nothing is ever exactly the way that you expect that it's going to be. So, so Steward is also bringing in a degree of flexibility, or that sort of, that through that nourishing, it's got sort of a water aspect to it as well, which is kind of like, send this out, bring this in,
Yeah.
To start to get things, basically it's keeping life going. It is regenerating. It is, if you think about the earth and, and plants and whatnot, they're not just doing nothing. Do you know what I mean? They're not just sort of sitting there like solid metal structures, not doing anything. So, yeah, there's more space coming back into it. There's more of a feeling of flow, and so I'm coming out of Steward, and then yes, of course, passing on to Curator, wherever. Actually, the way that I look at it more so is that what goes to Curator is what's failed in Steward. So if we were in a really, really healthy civilization or community or something like that, we would probably spend 70 to 80% of our time and attention in Steward, keeping things going, keeping life healthy and so on. So.
Yeah. What I recently I asked a group a couple of weeks ago, where if the restructuring of liquid capital or finances were directed towards you, not for the purposes of doing something new or starting something or pioneering something, but to protect something, to steward something. What is worth taking care of to you? What is worth cultivating? Or well, I'm using the term cultivating, but what is it worth it to you? What is worth protecting? So before we go into all of the archetypes, let me just ask both of you, what is worth protecting, and what is worth taking care of, or what is worth nurturing to you? So Melanie or Kylie, whoever would like to take that question.
Well, I would jump in, and thank you, Kylie, for, I hear you reflecting a stronger element on Steward for preservation. And for sure, I feel and acknowledge that. I guess by my nature, I tend to dance towards the edges of where I ask exactly the question of what you just asked. Michael, why are we doing this? Is this what we want to be doing? All of that moves towards the edges of from a solid to a more liquid phase. That's where I tend to put my focus. And what I would say at this point in time, pursuant to that question, is moving from a more ecosystem thinking, where fear and scarcity and the desire to make sure through apprehension that the world is safe, and all the machinations we do to do that, which is for most of us reverting to a 6 or 7-year-old strategy system that doesn't really serve us anymore, and moving to a more ecosystemic thinking, where through trust and relationships and relational frameworks, we start to realize we're not in this alone. We each have our area of brilliance, and when we can truly see and hear each other and relax more in what it is that we do well, but thinking in the larger ecosystem of where the gaps are, where we need to hand off and work with others to be able to keep the wheel and the movement of energy going. Now, when we start to think in ecosystems, there's an ease, there's a recognition of abundance and of the amazing nature of the world around us and how we're being inspired in every moment. I mean, I'm a healthcare provider, and every moment as I'm speaking and breathing, there's millions and millions of activities and catalysts and enzymes and movements just allowing words to come out of my mouth. I don't even think about that. It's like the whole universe is conspiring for this moment to happen. It can be jaw-dropping. And yet we live in these systems that have largely cut us in pieces and separated us from each other within some aberrant understanding that through our own self protection, we're going to be okay. And that's not how anything works in nature. And it's certainly not what has not worked for us. So that's what I think is really worth doing this work for, is doing what it takes in different circumstances, different people, different approaches to go from the fear of the small ego to the relaxation of the abundance of an ecosystemic way of being. That's what I would say to that wonderful question. Thank you.
I've completely forgotten the question. I was just dwelling in Melanie's answer.
I'll like to reflect, because there's a lot of correlation to my response as well too, Melanie, in that. So the question is, what is worth protecting, or why are we doing this? Is the question that Melanie had offered up as well too. For me, what has emerged is this understanding of natural law or universal principles that that kind of naturally guided life, and how we interact with each other, and this understanding now from a spiritual perspective that we are all sovereign, and all of the teachings come back to this understanding that we treat each other the way we want to be treated. So if we're treating each other as sovereign beings, we're treating everything as sovereign. We're treating every moment as sovereign. What's worth protecting to me is just understanding, how did we get from that natural understanding to these man-made laws that that do protect kind of tribal interests or corrupted interests. A lot of the work I've been looking into is about cultural tribalism. Why do people get together in groups or in organizations and feel the need to be competitive? So for me, what the answer would be, what's worth protecting, is how to create sacred spaces, or creating sacred spaces where we can all honor each other's sovereign rights to life, sovereign rights to happiness, um, and create spaces for compromise, for collaboration, and to really develop the skills where we can get over, or we can heal from whatever traumas are keeping us competitive, or keeping us hoarding certain resources, or whatever. And to me, what's worth protecting is, how do we open up that conversation? How do we deepen our trust in each other, and heal, heal from this mentality that that the way to thrive is to compete, and to engage in these tribal conflicts that we think of as war. So yeah, that would be my response to why I'm doing this, and what is worth protecting to me.
That's lovely. Thank you. For me, in some ways, it's a really simple question, and in other ways, I suppose it's very deep as well. The simple version is, what is worth protecting? Life.
Yeah.
But there's a lot in life. It's not just eking out a basic survival. It's about every moment. It's about some of the gratitude and the wonder that Melanie was allowing me to swim in her answer. It's each person, and I'm not even I suppose thinking about it so much in terms of sovereignty, although that's part of it. It's about a fullness of life without unnecessary limitation, without unnecessary pain, without unnecessary suffering. It's not that there's always going to be some, because that's part of life too. And in fact, it's part of what's beautiful about life too. And death has a place in it as well. And there is a beauty to that too. It's like words are failing me. They really are. It's one of those cases, if I wish I could just kind of pull out what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing and so on, and just kind of pass that over and not be trying to wrap words around it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think you're doing great. I think you're doing great, Kylie. Yeah, just ride that feeling, and that's I'd like to think that that's what this space is really all about. Is that it's not about finding the perfect words or perfection. It's what's alive here in this moment. So so yeah, yeah. So what I'm hearing is life. What I'm hearing is, cutting out what's unnecessary, the unnecessary pain, the unnecessary limitations, and that's very alive for me. And just receiving what you are offering up here is, and having the conversation so that we can speak openly and honestly about what is unnecessary, because a lot of times in our current structures, it's not okay or it's not safe to speak someone's truth. It's not safe to say, this doesn't work for me or this is not necessary for me. So that's what's alive for me, and just receiving what you offered up there.
Yeah. Well, so one of the flip sides of it, I suppose, is that zombies.
Yep.
I don't like zombies. They get in the way. They smother the sacred. They take all the time. And by zombies, I'm kind of meaning those structures that aren't necessary, the limitations that aren't real,
Mhm.
the things that sort of make something that into pain and suffering and complicatedness and so on that takes away from life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got a bit of an anti-zombie thing going on as well.
Yeah. Yeah. When
I
I think of
love that.
that, yes. When
I
I,
love that. That's it.
Yeah, when I think of the zombie comparison, I do think of those extractive systems where you think of zombies, they have to prey on the living and eat brains and whatnot. So I kind of think of that kind of extractive systems that have to extract energy but doesn't necessarily give back. So I think the zombie comparison is very appropriate, very appropriate.
And I would say too that regardless of the intention of those who perpetuate those systems, they stay in place because the ones who keep them alive and buy them or support them or educate themselves in them are coming from fear, are coming
Yeah.
from not enoughness. So we buy into that. And if that illusion gets pierced and we start to realize that actually I'm good the way I am, I have something to offer whoever I am, and I'm seen and I'm part of a larger system that values me, those systems naturally fall away. But I think there's an evolution on the planet right now in terms of consciousness, and I think even a genetic revolution. Whereas we deal with our own traumas and we start to heal ancestral wounds, we're realizing that the place for that is done. We've learned what we need to learn from that. Now it's the learning of how do you actually work cooperatively, and what does that mean? And that's where, as Bucky Fuller said, you make the old systems obsolete by creating new ones that just take their place. And it sounds a little Pollyanna-ish given the complexities of today's world, but as each of us do our own work in that way and start to come to the truth of who we are as being these precious, amazing beings who are being so supported in every moment and live in that, things really begin to shift in terms of who possibility and who we think we are, what we think is important. And again, it comes back to the value and the power of the steward. What is sacred? And how do you perpetuate that? And how do you take what's failed and keep moving it along so we can learn from it and get the energy moving around it?
What is sacred? Yeah. So I want to explore some of the questions that come up with each of the archetypes. And the reason why this fascinates me, Kylie, and why I just love, we had this conversation a few months ago now about how uh, there was an assignment of a question for each of the different archetypes. I'd like to explore a little bit how that came about, but also when it comes to perpetual transmutation of energy or the changing of the energy, I'm very fascinated with this idea that the questions change, that the question seems to change when you go from, different phases or different archetypes. And so we start with the pioneer archetype, and the question there is who, who. If you had to complete that question for where you are at in this moment, and in our collective understanding of this language. Um, tell me about who. Tell me about the connection between pioneering and the question who first, and then I'd like to ask both of you, if we were to complete that question, who dot 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 question mark. What is the question? Because a lot of what I've been exploring is going from competitive to collaborative, is being able to generate curiosity, to instead of getting to the answer right away or getting to the thing, it's really about being in the question, being able to be with the question, be in the silence of the question. So anyway, yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, but Kylie, I want to ask first, how did you come up with the correlation between the pioneer and the question who?
Well, okay, so in order to describe what I mean by who,
Mhm,
it's probably worth knowing that whenever I go into chirotic flow for anything, I actually always start at Steward. Right?
mhm,
So
okay,
and that's the where question, right?
yeah.
So where are things at? What is the context? Where
Let's
are
start there then. Let's start
right.
there.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I won't
So
go into it in too much depth, but
yeah,
just to provide the background, we can go back into these ones in more
yeah.
depth.
No, that's great. No, let's start there, and we'll go around, starting with Steward and the where question. I like that.
Okay, and so where are the problems? Where are the resources? Where are the needs? Where are the so it's very much Steward is getting right back into context. It's getting right back into
Mm,
into the ground, into real location. So
mm,
where is Steward's question? And then when something is sort of is failing and it's like there is no way to fix things with where, like you can't just take it from here to there because it's just not working. Then you want to know why.
mhm,
You know, why are we doing that? Why did that go wrong? Like why would we keep something going? Why would we stop something?
mhm,
What order of things, so why does this happen after that? So it's quite a sciencey feel
mhm,
to it, curator. After that, so after you've got, like the needs and the values that come out of all of those why questions, like why would we do this? What is our purpose? Why?
mm,
Then you're looking at Scout, which is like, okay, so what is possible at this point?
mm,
You know,
mm,
what does it take to make something happen from this new starting point, that would meet the needs and according to the values that have come from Curator.
mm,
So the what is very, in a way, it's a very philosophical question. It's not like Stewards, like this solid where, the location. Scouts is far more what is possible, what is feasible, what are the risks, what are the uncertainties, what is there over there. So it's just discovering kind of thing, like what's that, what is it, what does it mean, what can it do. And because Scout's view is sort of, it's either spiritual or mental, or it's not in the tangible world, right? So it's looking at all of those possibilities. So then when you get to pioneer, it's like, this is where identification starts. This is where a goal comes up. This is where birth happens, right? So who is not just pointing at something that actually exists already? It's an identity formation. It's a defining. It's a, you know, who is this idea? You know, like, so that you're starting to get a bit of shape. So there's something that you can point at. There's something that you can try to get a grip on. And yeah, sometimes it's people. Sometimes it's you know, who's interested in this thing. That can be a thing, but just that birthing in as something that can be identified in some way. And actually, an interesting sort of sideline with this one is that I have noticed that many of the pioneer people that I know, or people who prefer pioneer, like my husband, are what I would call the namer of things. All right, so he comes up with some amazing names for various various things that are just spot on, because it's understanding what the essence is and kind of wrapping a label around it in some way so that you can figure out what that concept is. Yeah. So, and as for how I kind of got each of them, I've been using those questions forever. I was always when I was doing business analysis and project management. In fact, if you talk to any of the people that I used to work with, they would go, "Oh, Kylie, you know, who, what, when, where, why, how questions."
Nice.
Because that's what I would do all the time. It's like, okay, let's think this through. You know, where do we have to do this? You know, like where, you know, what actually matters here, and then I'll just go through them. And it may almost have actually directed the archetypes even without me particularly realizing. So I'm not sure which came first, actually, the archetypes or the questions.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because on that, almost like on that subliminal level, anything that we think of comes from like an unconscious question. And so you think to yourself, well, is that true? Oh, well, there's a question, you know, okay, I guess maybe it is. Well, where has it happened in my life? Oh, there's another question that's coming up. So yeah, it is kind of like that chicken and the egg thing. But please continue, because you got into the who question or the labels with the pioneer. Let's continue the how and the cultivator.